Good evening and welcome to another art stream with myself, Pharaoh, and my fellow compatriots, Alexander Adams and Panama Hat. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Diversity is our strength, comrades.
We have nothing to lose but our chains, chaps.
Wonderful. And the usual wonderful slogans. It literally, my heart swells. And tonight we're following up from the last stream on the Orientalists. But before we start, I just wanted to give an apology. I am a little bit ill, and so I'll be doing my best. But apologies if there's any coughs coming through.
Pharaoh was caught consumption because he lives near a mine, and the fumes and smog, etc., have caused his lungs to degrade. And we worry that this may actually be his last appearance on this channel. Actually, he's very ill.
He's stretched out, looking very pallid on a chaise longue.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Being the romantic dandy that I am exceedingly susceptible to these kind of consumptive
illness attacks of death.
Exactly. So, but I will compose a poem in honor of my own death or something like that.
Yes,
off the year. Now, before we start, Alex, do you have any corrections from last time? I like having this in as a little segment at the beginning of each stream now.
I haven't spotted any, but there were probably some. But I couldn't think of anything offhand.
Okay, wonderful. So I guess, shall we just do a quick recap of what happened last time and then just carry on? So, Alex, do you want to just take us through some of the points from last time?
Yeah, so basically Egyptology started as a science in the last years of the 18th century with the French invasion of Egypt. And this basically kickstarted a new round of Orientalism. Orientalism as a genre had existed before, but it sort of existed in bits and parts. It became an actual sort of movement or genre in the 19th century and died out basically in 1914 with the outbreak of the war. And so we've covered some of the groundwork, and we've looked at especially Jerome, who is probably, I would say, the leading Orientalist painter and a fine painter in his own right and should be better known. And so we did a lot of his work, and then we also looked at Delacroix. And mentioning Delacroix, actually, it's worth popping over to my blog if you're interested, because I've recently posted 2 reviews of one of Picasso's versions of Les Femmes d'Alger, and which was painted by Delacroix, which we discussed last time. And there's also a short review of a book which covered literature, British literature dealing with Orientalism in the Georgian Regency and Romantic period, and those are both on my blog, so they're worth taking a look at.
I would particularly recommend the Picasso one because it was a wonderful setting up, explaining some of the connections between the paintings, and just a wonderful little nugget of information, and when placed in the context of what we've been listening to tonight was quite wonderful. So you will not get that level of insight and information anywhere else apart from the Alexander Adams blog. So please, can you subscribe to it somehow? Join the newsletter.
You can do it as an RSS feed, where I think items sort of automatically get sort of emailed. You get email notifications or something. I haven't tried it myself, but you can do that, or you can just visit, because there's new material on there virtually every week.
Okay, yeah. Well, please check out that article. I did retweet it a couple of days ago. So,
I should give the address. It's www, of course, alexanderadamsart.wordpress.com.
Wonderful. One thing I wanted to kind of highlight from the last stream was the thematic approach to some of the art we've been looking at. So previously we've been looking at typically artists individually or as groups, but we decided to kind of go for more of this kind of collectivized approach, looking at vignettes and motifs to be able to compare them. And some of the areas we covered last time were things like the harem, and bathers as part of that, the kind of slaves. And I think what's nice about that is you get a bit of a contrast in terms of the artists, and we're going to be continuing that theme. So let me just load up the pictures, and we'll make a start.
Oh, hello to the chat, by the way. We'll be trying to answer any of your questions if you put them into the chat.
Yes, do shout out. Shout out? Put a question, and I'll be keeping an eye on it. I'll bring it up.
Okay, yes. So this is the Turkish Bath by Ingres, which was basically his last masterpiece. So this was painted in 1862, and I think we calculated it was something like 65 or 70% of the picture surface covered by naked flesh. And this was sort of seen as very degenerate by my two co-hosts, and perhaps they're right. I can't deny, but I remember that Panama was very struck by the figure on the left, the seated figure. Yeah, that's it. And he thought that this was much higher quality than the other subjects, the other figures. That it's more, I think, obviously it looks a lot more real and a lot more sort of more present. It's got more, there's more contrast. It's slightly different color as well.
I should also, I think we decided that this one was the kind of most Kuma image of all the ones we looked at. Kind of like there's no real historical justification for this picture. Let's put it that way.
Yep. So the next picture will show you that was the original. So this is.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the bather of Alpine Song. So the Turkish Bath was painted in 1862, right at the end of his life, just a few years before he died. And the bather of Alpine Song was painted near the beginning of his career in 1808. So he was 28 when he did the first painting, and he was in his what was it, 80 or something? Yeah, he was over 80 when he did the Turkish Bath.
Right.
So this is you can see the original, much sort of grounded in observation. He did many sketches from life, and he's clearly captured quite a realistic effect. He has tweaked it. He was famous for slightly altering the anatomies of figures to make them more graceful, to make the outline more important, because he was very keen on lines and outlines, and making forms like a sort of a bas relief, because the bas relief from Roman times was a sort of was an aesthetic trend, and so he followed this, and this is why it's quite sort of shallowly modelled. But I think it's an absolutely beautiful example.
It's interesting seeing the changes. So you've obviously got similarities, the kind of headdress across there, the back and the lighting is a perfect reproduction in the past. Although I feel like he loses some subtlety from the past. You can see just some of the kind of lighter highlights are very nice. The sorry, the big difference is obviously in the hands and the seating position. I quite like the changes though. In some ways, I think he has improved upon the original piece. And again, you're talking about the lines. There's this kind of flatness. The leg to me doesn't feel. That thigh isn't chunky enough in my my brain.
He deliberately thinned that to sort of make the lines flow more, to flow better. This was something that he did quite a lot. Yeah. And you'll notice on the left, for the round one where she's seated, the curve of the outside of her thigh matches the curve of the outside of the painting, and this was done deliberately to sort of make it echo.
Right. Yeah. I see.
That's good, yeah, and then obviously the additional the musical instrument in the jacket as well adds a bit of kind of textual difference. So I think I just wish he'd spent as much time as this on the rest of the painting, or like again, it's just a painting within a painting. It's a very strange thing in my opinion, but
it is like a dream image. Or indeed a fantasy. I mean, it's been described by lots of modernist art critics as like as a sort of as the fantasy of an old man who's sort of preparing to leave the world, and he's far past, actually doing anything, and so he's just caught up in this fantastic dream.
I quite like the story behind it as well, like the 28 to 80 as well. The fact that he is able to produce this kind of art that late into his life is quite rare, and you often see a strong degradation in both technique and just think something as simple as the eyesight going massively affecting it. But I wonder if he started it earlier.
He was, well, I think it took quite a long time. I think it took at least 2 years, maybe 4 years, and so he started when he was about 80, and he finished when he was 82.
Okay. But still, a quite wonderful figure. Okay, so let's continue on to more bathing.
Yeah, more bathing. So we're just going to finish off a little bit with the Harem. So this is Edouard d'Ebe Poncin. This is the massage from 1883. You'll find that there's something that the painters, the Orientalist painters, delight in, is contrasting the whitest of white of the wives in the harem with black servants. So these would be either black women servants who wash and clean and massage and serve, and then there are also the black eunuchs. We'll be doing some more on the eunuchs in a minute. So this is a common trope, and I think it works especially well here. So everything is very pale. You've got the sort of the blues and the lilacs of the cool tiles, and then you've got the sort of chilly grey of the stone, and then the only really sort of strong colour is the black attendant and her robes.
And sorry, Farrah, go on.
You go first.
Well, I was going to say the figure of the black woman there strikes me as being far more muscular than you'd ever see a woman depicted normally in these types of paintings. Muscle is, unless I'm wrong, muscle is not normally so defined in that way. That's the first thing that struck me anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, this looks very much like a servant or even a slave, or a farmer.
Yes. Which lends it accuracy,
that being said,
historically at least. Sorry, Farrah.
Yeah, that being said, I do feel like that they're relatively muscular arms or whatever. There's very little definition in a modern woman's arms. If you've ever done any life drawing, or someone who doesn't work doesn't do any manual labor. But just going back to the colors, I think what's interesting as well, you can see all of the seeming black colors have that kind of blue base to them still, so they're again all connected together. And then the orange is the contrast to blue, but even the brown itself is normally like derived from a darkened orange or a darkened red. So that's the connection. It is the contrast. I also quite like the little tap across here, which is again just a little shot of color in a similar way. Just this actually reminded me of the kind of love of Turkish tiles, and I don't know if you guys have ever been to Leighton's house.
Yes, it's absolutely fantastic. It's an artist's house. Leighton was a painter from the aesthetic movement at the end of the 20th century, an English painter. So it's Lord Frederick Leighton. He was head of the RA, I believe, at the time of his death. And yeah, Oh, sorry. No. Go on, Farrah. You tell us about it.
You go.
Basically, he had this fantastic house that he had built in a time when artists can get massive houses built in the centre of London. So this is Holland Park, and he built a giant house with like multiple studios, and the downstairs is he has an Oriental theme, and so this is sort of like a sort of Turkish bathhouse harem. So this is actually in London, designed by him using, I think it's authentic tiles and decorations.
Well, it's a combination. I believe he bought some, and again the ones at the top with the kind of Kufic writing or the Nazareth are originals, but then I believe some of these tiles are reproductions because, again, obviously William de Morgan quite famously had a series of tiles based on the kind of Turkish colours, etc. But this little space is meant to be like a bath. You see at the centre, there's like a pool of water, and it's just a little bit of novel Orientalism, and those tiles in the background just reminded me of it, and it's worth checking out because the rest of the house looks totally normal, and you've almost got this kind of mosque-esque dome, the kind of curtains at the top. Also, interestingly, they've got the kind of Byzantine mosaic top as well, which again is reminiscent of some of the mosques in Damascus, etc., where they had Byzantine craftsmen doing these kind of golden mosaics at the same time. But like you said, if you look at it from the outside, it's this large red brick building, late Victorian, and you couldn't tell it has this kind of little novelty. But there was a bit of a kind of a frenzy for like Turkish style baths towards the late Victorian period in England as well, and there are a few locations in London where they created them, or they're mainly demolished now. But
I should mention someone in the chat was asking. Yes, he did do that statue of a man wrestling a snake. Very very symbolic that, but it's a fantastic piece. I think maybe we could talk about Leighton at some stage when we look at some Victorian artists.
For sure.
Sorry, I know you go on.
Yeah, I just think he's they're almost like the kind of counterbalance to Jerome. You know, between Leighton and Alma Tadema, if that's how you say his name right, the short little Dutchman. Had their own kind of academic vision in England, which was very different to the kind of French Orientalist driven. So,
yeah, I should mention that the reason I selected this was because I didn't know this painting before, but I came across it in a book that I bought, which is called Harem, and it's by Valentin Gallet, Gallet, and it's published by Koneman. And this is a new book, so you can buy this book. And it's really cheap. It's just basically a picture book. So you can get this for, I think, under £10 or something. I'd really recommend it because it's got loads of Orientalist paintings set in the sort of the harem or the bathhouse. And it has Orientalist paintings. It has Persian paintings and some Mughal paintings as well. And it also has some photographs of the settings. So you can actually see some of these bathhouses and harems in real life. So I recommend that book.
Just going back to the painting a second, there's also something around the lines, and again there is this kind of relaxedness, the curves of the woman lying, and then again the angular nature of the masseuse here, and also I love just this hand on the left here. Again, this totally unrealistic. No one rests the hand like that just so beautifully. There's this little classical moment as well. So again, I feel like there is this. They're still pulling on this classico-romantic strain in the way they're kind of laying out some of the models and structuring the scenes. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of this. Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like I'm sort of dirtying these wonderful discussions of art by bringing these sorts of things in, but I think it's worth pointing out that these days this sort of painting would be attacked by academics and art critics as a sort of racialist, white supremacist piece, probably. And I mean, Alexander, I don't know if you know if it has already. I mean, I know
this piece not specifically, but similar pieces, yes. I mean, and basically the whole thrust of Said's Orientalism, which we discussed at the beginning of the first stream, is basically taking that on, and this is the bread and butter of feminist critics and racial art critics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a real terrible shame, and I mean, I mean, this is a theme that came up quite frequently in the last stream as well, because of course in the Middle East, in the period that many of these paintings were being made, or the period that they're trying to ape, there was indeed an extraordinarily large serving class of sub-Saharan Africans, who some of whom were extremely kind of high level, and served all over the Ottoman and other Middle Eastern countries civil services and armies as commanders and high-ranking troops and things like that. And there are also a class such as this who were employed as servants and kind of technical positions like this. We're working in a bathhouse or something. So this is as we say, the Orientalists that actually went to the Middle East would have seen this. This is not sort of an invention.
Mm.
Okay. Next painting.
Okay, so here we have we got a bit of soap opera drama for you. So this is Theodore Raleigh, who I believe he might be Italian. So we said we'd try and stick to the French, but we haven't had a few Englishmen, and so I think this is an Italian. And this is called Jealousy Among the Jealous. So here we can see, basically, it's one of the Sultan or the Emir's wives has killed another one of the wives. So you can see all the disruption, or the overturned sort of braziers and tables and so forth, and all the sort of the disturbed drapery, and then you've got the woman in the alcove clutching herself in horror, looking down at the dead body of her love rival. So here we have it's a scene of not so much action, but sort of drama.
This is a scene from AA's Woman's Hour, four episodes in.
It's probably going to get there, isn't it?
So Saffron has finally killed Poe or something. Or Sarah, yeah.
Saffron's going to kill Poe and take over as the alpha woman on the stream. Basically, that's the move.
Mean, you do have to wonder, given that the rulers in the Middle East at this time, and in some cases even still today, would have entire harems of wives and concubines and female companions and favorites and this sort of thing. I mean, there must have been a rampant jealousy and cliquism among that group of women. I mean, I'm gonna look into it and see if I can find any details on that, because it must have been quite a tremendous issue if you're going to have one prince or something with an entire a block of women for that purpose. Sorry, go on.
There is actually like a quite famous series written like it's like basically like a TV soap opera. Like the kind of Mexican daytime soap operas.
Telenovelas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's set in like Ottoman period. I think they call it like Ottomania. Like there's loads of these like films. I liked series, and I watched a couple which were absolutely terrible. But they did have these kind of moments where, again, unsurprisingly, a whole load of women fighting for status inside a closed environment created intrigues, plots, and ultimately, deaths as well. So, if you want some sort like some lowbrow material, check out. I'll find the name of it and post it on my Twitter feed. But it's pretty awful.
I know that. I know that one of the criticisms that often is leveled at Orientalism is that it basically allows painters to show women in all states of nudity in various salacious positions, whilst also sort of ascribing the salaciousness to the sources, to Islamic culture, or to the harem, or to the East, the effeminate East, and so forth. And I have to say that although I have very little sympathy with new criticism, which is sort of basically feminism and Orientalism and subaltern theory and so forth, and sort of post-colonial theory and so forth, they do actually have a point in terms of salaciousness.
I mean, this is a very salacious nude right here. You've got again, I think it's about the angle, it's about the revealedness, and in some ways I think it's kind of worse than the in Grez. It's something that's just so hard to judge. I don't know if this will actually load up. Maybe
it's
not.
Okay. I think it's ingrained in our memory.
Yeah. But I think again there's something where this definitely crosses the line out of kind of let's just say like the kind of the tasteful nude into something else. That being said, I think there is a need for the nudity in this painting, because this is all about the love rival, and why does a rivalry happen? Because someone is more beautiful than the other, and you can see here two women here. One with this kind of much more pretty face. You've got this kind of, it's hard to tell from the kind of the shade. I mean, she's literally in the darkness across here, both emotionally and physically. But you can see maybe from her body that's laid out that she is the uglier of the pair, and you have this kind of almost, she's laid out like a platter on a platter for us to see, just to witness her beauty.
So you're basically dissing Saffron. You're saying that she's not as pretty as Sarah. Or
please forget the analogy. Please forget.
I've abandoned. I've jettisoned the analogy. It was
I see.
It was only a cheap joke.
I feel humbled.
So going back to my point is, if this person was clothed, I don't think it would have such an impact. That sheer you need that contrast of the clothed and the non-clothed. True beauty. And I wouldn't say ugliness, but plainness, because that's where the rivalry comes from.
Yeah.
But I think it's things like just some of the positioning of the clothes. He's pushing it a little bit too far on the matters of taste, and again, just the attention to detail. It's all about the figure. So again, he spent ages doing the kind of beautiful shading, lots of detailing on the legs, like so much effort on the feet, while the you can see that the hand has been barely done on the other figure. So again, it's kind of like the obsession with that other figure. But again, there's an argument to say it's almost like you're there in that scene, and the focus is all on the figure in the foreground.
I think your point about it thematically supporting itself is very important here, because as you said, the body on the floor there appears to kind of glow out of the painting, whereas everything else appears to kind of fade into the background. I mean, also there's perhaps some stylistic elements such as that blood red robe that the attacker is wearing, or the alcove she's in, with those two great pillars beside her and the sort of spikes that are in the pattern behind her. I mean, and something else that's absolutely great about these types of paintings is the display of Middle Eastern architecture, which, I mean, if these are accurate representations of what that place looked like at this time, then it seems to have been going through something of a golden age in terms of these designs. I mean, this alcove. I mean, you do see these alcoves in that type of architecture, or at least I have in my cursory lookings at it. I'm not sure what function they serve in particular, or if they're just an aesthetic thing.
They are an aesthetic thing, and having looked at photographs of originals, which are in the book that I just mentioned, this is pretty accurate.
Right.
The other interesting thing for me about this is kind of like that there is a bit of the kind of male fantasy to this. Again, imagine you're the prince or whatever. You want to imagine all the women are fighting over yourself. So that's where I think, actually, just from a conceptual perspective, that's where it is. But I think the reality would also be the same. There's a few other touches that I quite like the use of the tiger skin across there, symbolizing fierceness, the positioning of the figures. There's the verticalness of her versus the horizontalness. So again, it's this aggression, and there is some strong pathos to this. Again, it's kind of like, why is she undressed? You can see that she has her body. It doesn't look like her body's been pierced by a dagger or anything like that.
There is actually a mark on her breast. You can't see it very clearly, but it's there.
But again, I think there's something about the revealed and the not revealed. It's the hidden. It's all about contrasts in this painting. So again, on the face of it, I think you could write this off as this kind of salacious coon painting, but I think there is much more depth to it when you look closely.
And there's I mean, just as a point, I mean, there's not that needs to be said, but there's clearly been a fight in here. There's clearly been a struggle to back up your point about the women are so inflamed with passion that they're, you know, trashing the room in an effort to kill each other, you know.
Okay, so here we have, so some of you will remember the, from part one, there was a painting by Lecomte Noy of the woman, of the beautiful pale woman who was smoking a cigarette, and there was a carved wooden spoon. This is by the same artist. This is Ramesses in the Harem, 1885, by Lecomte Noy. And of course, you can see that this is obviously going back to Egyptian times. So this is pre-Islamic, pre-Ottoman, the Arabic Islamic society of Egypt. But what he's done here is he's fused the two. And so here you see Ramesses here with his wives. And I think basically you just look at them and you think, well, they're indolent, they're stoned, and they're playing games. So I think that they're proto-Zoomers.
Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of one of those paintings where I'm thinking, is there really a justification for the nakedness here? You know.
Well, I mean, it is relatively chaste, though. I mean, you don't get to see very much. So, I mean, it's kind of unnecessary. But then, of course, you know, you've got to think of it's a very hot environment. You know, so you know your natural tendencies. If you were closeted and you were in an area where you couldn't be seen by anyone, by any outsiders, then you might just simply take off your clothes. So.
I suppose so.
Yeah. And also you've got the architecture is a weird sort of hybrid mix, because there is nothing like this that has been preserved from ancient Egypt. So this is obviously a sort of an invented style that kind of fuses Orientalism and Egyptology.
I see.
It's a bit whimsical. Just on that kind of Egyptology, it's obvious that the painter has done some studies. For example, you know, this looks like it could be a column from the Temple of Karnak. But then he's kind of painted it with some of those kind of colors of the time. Now, again, I saw Cringewalker in chat. So he's our resident Egypt nerd when it comes to architecture. But to my knowledge, I've never seen a column painted in. It's basically a specific kind of glaze they would use.
I think that's Egypt blue. There was a specific color that was called Egypt blue.
Yeah, there we go. But it's a ceramic glaze. But I've never seen anything like it in a column like that. It's the same.
I've never seen it fired. I mean, you could fire it in blocks and then assemble it, but I mean, it is very. I've never seen anything that large fired with a glaze.
Yeah, and the same thing with the kind of reds that he's pulled out. There have been kind of wall paintings, etc., using this kind of quite dark, like it's almost like a madder red from that kind of organic dye.
And you can see vermilion.
Yeah, and you can see they've pulled in these kind of hieroglyphics here, which is kind of like, would you really have like just 3 hieroglyphics on the corner of a a lot of it just doesn't make sense. Where he's tried to pull in, or again, this object across here, like he's tried to throw in a whole lot of stuff saying, "Oh, look how Egyptian this is," but then I think it just doesn't work. And again, maybe it's just the context of, you know, at that time where there's just such little information about the history of Egypt, this would have looked amazing to people, but to me now this looks like it's just a hodgepodge of things that this guy found in a book about Egypt and then threw it together.
It looks like, you remember we did that the international exposition, we did the film. Yes. And we looked at all the different pavilions. This looks like the Egypt pavilion from sort of 1900. Ancient
Egyptian pavilion. That'd be an amazing theme. Get the Athenians there, do Bronze Age civilization pavilions.
By the way, in reference to your point, Cringewalker says that the glaze is not likely.
Okay.
Yeah, because they did paint walls and they did paint reliefs, but I don't think because I'm always thinking of and Babylon, where they have the gates with the fired glazed bricks, but I don't think that was common in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, and the other problem is that because he's gone for those design choices of like the quite bold red and turquoise, he's then had to mold the rest of the colors around it, and for me, it's just like a real hot mess of loads of different colors. You've got kind of like yellows, pinks, etc. There's no kind of contrasting themes. Just feel like the super tight color scheme across here, where it's just so it's almost barren compared to this kind of. There's some fruit there because it's a fruity delight basically. Sorry.
I have to make a really mid-wit interjection about this. Now, you two are going to be able to explain this more accurately, I think, but there's a very off quality to this painting to me. Something isn't quite right with the way it looks. And if I had to compare it, this is probably far too specific, but I don't know if you've ever seen like Chinese attempts at classical artwork where they all have this kind of like quality or kind of like a way that things look that just doesn't sort of look Western. There's just something
like someone speaking a language, but they haven't really got the idiom.
Kind
of
of
words.
like
so all the words are sort of right, but it just sounds really sort of artificial.
Yeah, like this just has that glaze to it. I can't really point out specifically what's causing it, or if it's just me being an idiot.
I think the space is not particularly well articulated, and he's sort of jumbled stuff up. But then I think maybe that was his point, that it was supposed to be a fantasy. It wasn't supposed to be persuasive. So you know, it's like the Angres painting right at the beginning. That's kind of like a jumble of all those figures. It doesn't feel realistic. It's not really meant to be realistic. It's meant to give you the sense of a dream. But I do agree that this is a very weird thing because it's part Orientalist, part Egyptology, part sort of French 19th century. It's odd.
There's something technically as well, Panama, that you may be feeling. Where again, just if you can see some of the shading across here and the colors he's using, this is like total realism. Basically, all like the hair is very, very real. You can see the shimmer and the shine. There's a graphic quality to this.
I think maybe also because you don't have very much reflected light. You don't have because there's a difference between atmospheric and local color. Local color means basically if you have an orange sitting on a table on a white tablecloth, the amateur painter or the primitivist painter or the modernist painter would just have an orange that's painted orange and a white tablecloth. Whereas if you actually look at it, the light reflects off the orange onto the tablecloth. So you'd actually have a sort of pool of orange reflected light around the piece of fruit in reality. And so with the Noy, it looks as though he's not doing the reflected light. That's why all the pieces don't feel like they're really sort of integrated.
There is, I quite like these two little, almost as mini vignettes at the back here, the kind of the bored woman. And I imagine that's what the majority of the time in the harem would be like, just sort of lazing around. She's got a kind of a Bronze Age polished copper mirror there as well. And that's quite a fun little scene. And again, the idea of like here's the lotus eater in the background, whiling out her hours away, floating off on a fantasy of her own. And I quite like the kind of pose and just the distance that she has. So I think there are a few little redeeming things here, but I think he suffers thematically, basically.
Maybe I'll give you a brief quote from my review, which mentions. It's only one paragraph. It says, in the history of women, 1779, William Alexander, that's the author, discussed the situation of women in the East. He advanced the idea that as society advanced, it freed women from labor, but that this freedom caused now indolent women to gravitate to corruption and pursuit of vice. Thus, financial and material security led women to become less maternal and faithful and more selfish and depraved. Quotes, female virtue is becoming ever more scarce as the feminine qualities of care and concern for others diminish gradually in proportion as women advance more toward that perfection, or rather that imperfection of politeness. End quote.
I mean, just look at this debauchery right now. A woman playing chess. Outrageous.
Disgusting. Eating a watermelon. This is the ashes of civilization.
Interesting quote though, but I'm not convinced through this painting, I'm afraid to say. Okay.
Okay, so this is another one by Noy, Lecomte Noy. This is called the Eunuchs Dream from 1874. I think this painting's in Cleveland. So you can see that the poor old eunuch has been sitting on a rooftop, and he's been smoking his probably opium or possibly hashish, but possibly I would probably say opium, and he's having a dream of a beautiful naked woman who's rising from the smoke of his pipe. And can you see what's on the left?
The knife.
There's a little cherub carrying a knife, which was used to castrate him.
So
this is like early Freudian painting.
Yeah, so this is him escaping to fantasy because this is something that he will never have a woman.
God.
And yeah.
Well, hang on. If eunuchs are completely castrated, do they still have lust in that way?
I don't know, but obviously they can't. Oh, is it okay? So I think the sex drive is lowered, and also they can't sort of perform. Obviously,
Oh yeah.
you massively lose testosterone, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, so which is why you'll see the paintings of eunuchs. They're generally slightly fatter because they tend to gain weight. Then they have sort of male breasts as well.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't really mention them in the last stream, but eunuchs were ubiquitous all over the Ottoman Empire specifically. The other, as far as I'm aware, an expert may correct me, but I don't think that other Muslim nations or tributaries of the Ottomans, like the Arabic countries, really went in for eunuchs at all. But the Ottomans really did. They had entire regiments of eunuchs to serve, to bring up children, to actually guard the harems and to look after the harems as well. Because of course, a eunuch can't really do too much to any of your brides or concubines. They educated young royalty as well. I think there were a whole facet of Ottoman life, basically. Some of them, some of them were just sort of poor servants. Some of them reached enormous positions of power and influence. But they were kind of a class unto themselves, basically, in this civilization. And also, there's a hell of a lot of things going on in this painting. Like, I'm curious about what is that? A bird up on the roof behind?
Yeah, so that would be a heron,
a crane,
crane, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the handprint on the wall there by the steps.
I suppose maybe the heron is sort of the dream of traveling to distant lands, which of course he can't do because he's either indentured or he's actually a slave.
Mm-hmm.
I'm presuming at his level.
Yeah. It's quite a fascinating painting, this, and I'm gonna look into this later on because there's a lot happening here.
And someone in the chat is asking about what is the inscription next to the bloody handprint. I think that is just the name of I think it's just the name of the artist and the date, isn't it?
I cannot zoom on this painting. I may grab a quick. I'll see if I can get a larger.
No, yes, okay, I've got it here. I've got it in the book that I mentioned. Lecomte de Noy, 1874. So yeah, it's just the name of the artist and the date, and I suppose the handprint is just sort of signal that he has done this. The detail is actually quite lovely. On the left, you'll see that there are buildings, and there's sort of like an orange light coming through the sort of the window grills and around the door and stuff. It's quite beautiful. Yes.
I have managed to find an enlarged face, so we can now zoom. Yeah, just there's a whole lot of interesting themes in this. There is kind of again a light and darkness theme. So you can see it if you just step back a second from the painting, look at the colours on the top right hand side here. It's really like dark midnight. On the left hand side there is this lightness, and again we kind of assume it to be the moon. So you can see like the kind of reflections on the mosques across here. It's one of those nights that it is dark, but it has that kind of brightness to it. but the artist has sort of intentionally cropped out the moon, so you get this feeling of lightness and brightness coming, but from these two mystical figures which appear out of the
Smoke.
out of the smoke at the same time. There's also the kind of, again, just from a colours perspective, you've got this really quite like barren, stripped back landscape of greys and blues, contrasted with this little corner of brightness. And again, like you said, there's a few of these kind of shots of orange in the lights, which are really add a bit of detail. But again, there's kind of like this grey, misty malaise with this sharp, definite detail.
And then if you have a look at the still life on the right, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just talking about the kind of the symbols, the fruit itself. He is fruitless. Two large fruit in the bowl there is very, very symbolic. The fact that he has a sword, again, it's that Ottoman style I mentioned with the cloven top, the sword versus the sword, and I think it's interesting because obviously they're kind of reference to the janissaries and other mercenary troops that were eunuchs. The one reading is, yes, this is the child that he never had, or never could have because of the castrating knife. But maybe he's killed a mother or killed someone as part of his duties as a soldier, and that's the child that was killed. Or something. Do you see what I'm saying? So there is another kind of reading inside there. Just in terms of the figure herself, she's obviously like a dancer. There is a very long-standing symbol of the Syrian dancer dating back to literally about 500 AD from, again, Damascus again, a naked woman with sort of these kind of castanets in her hand and a veil around her body as well. So again, it's thematically, this is a very old symbol. She's also got kind of like a diadem of stars around her head, which again, it sort of places her in the background, but gives her that kind of celestial quality. And then I love this the little boy, the bloody knife, the broken bowl, and again, he's wearing this little cap at the same time. And the figure himself, he is in this quite tense pose. You can see his kind of, he's poking his eyes out. They're definitely not fully closed. He's trying to look out, but I feel like he's in pain or in suffering, and maybe.
No, I think he's just stoned.
but it's kind of like he is stoned, but he's trying to look. He's kind of like waking up and seeing something through just the slit in his eyes. Can you just see the artist as I think he's just put the people in there. It's quite hard to see. So again, there's this idea of awaking and sleeping and dreaming and death at the same time, and then again, he just in terms of some of the kind of the objects. Obviously, we've got the sword. We've got the kind of classic 8-sided table. The rugs. Look at how the hand is kind of laid out to kind of present some of the jewelry there, and even the shoes. I think this is a much more successful painting than the previous one that we saw from him. So,
yeah. So here is another painting. So this is by Jerome. So we're back to Jerome now. And this is another one. This is a series of eunuchs and guards. So we're on to eunuchs and guards now. This is the Harem in the Kiosk, 1875 to 1880. So this is obviously you have whether or not I don't think the guards were eunuchs, but the servers in the back with the tall hats, they were eunuchs. But they were cloistered, and of course they're wearing the niqab, so you can't see the faces. And this is quite a striking painting of the way that any ordinary person living in sort of Constantinople, for example, would have perhaps glimpsed the wives of the sort of the pasha at a distance, behind a guard, and quite inaccessible.
Yeah.
I think that this is a painting by someone who's actually been to one of these places and has seen these kind of scenarios, it's totally unromanticized version of the harem here, where everyone is sort of masked up, and you can't tell who everyone is. So,
well, there's no way you'd go outside in the Middle East with little clothes on. I mean, you'd just get burned to a crisp, wouldn't you? I presume.
Okay, so this is definitely Constantinople. I've looked at the catalogue. I mentioned the catalogue from last time, the Orientalism catalogue from 1984. So this is Constantinople. Jerome visited Constantinople in 1854, and he also went there in 1871 and 1875. So by this time he's visited 3 times, and this is definitely Constantinople. And he's talking about so basically that's what he's saying in the catalogue.
Mm-hmm. It looks like Constantinople, and I think, Farah, as you say, this looks like somebody that was actually there or went there closely to painting this.
There's something about the it's almost like a tourist photo. It's like, take a photo of me next to the harem across there. But again, there's something interesting about the kind of foreground versus background here, where Jerome's quite famous for focusing on guards, but that he loves her harem at the same time. So it's an interesting mix of the guard who's staring directly at us. There's the kind of brutalness, a casualness to him, what against the kind of formality and hidden nature of the women behind. The fact they're in the background itself adds to kind of their mystery. You can't even see their figures, let alone their faces.
It looks like sort of Turkish delight in a box, in a little box, doesn't it? All like pastel colours, dusted in sugar.
Yeah.
Sorry, Panama, were you going to say anything?
I'm not really sure how to phrase it, but I'm so struck by the depiction of the architecture. I mean, it must have been a beautiful place to go at this time. And again, there's a certain element of sadness, because you simply can't see any of this now, because it's either all become touristy or it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, does Constantinople still have these great walls and turrets that we see here?
It's a really sad story, because a lot of them were destroyed in the 60s. So, for example, the Palace of the Bukilion, which was one of the major imperial palaces that the Byzantine rulers would live in, was severely damaged in like the 40s and 50s, and forgotten. But at this time,
any particular reason? Was there a civil conflict, or
it's basically people just wanted space to put up new buildings, basically. But also there is a general disregard of the past. Not to be mean, but it's true basically. Where I feel like the Turkish spirit. The English spirit is one of natural preservation, and again, while I think we have done many horrible things, I think it's just not in our nature to destroy the past. Again, this isn't a slight on the Turks, but I'm just saying that they have less of those compunctions naturally. But I want you to imagine the Bosphorus here, just awash with sailed vessels, and again, I think part of that the romance is seeing like the triangles of the sails and the traffic, while today it's all like motorboats. Maybe let me see if we can find a picture quickly.
It's I mean, I also suppose that they all went through that process with Ataturk in the 20s and 30s, where they kind of, the anti-Ottoman perspective, where they just kind of shamed their past and introduced Western progressivism in a very militant manner. Hasn't really helped the historical preservation in many of these places either.
I mean, you can get a bit of a view here, but this is mainly kind of like larger Victorian sailed ships, but they're still. Look at that
from you.
Should we have a look now? I'll spell Bosphorus. No one in chat is allowed to criticize my spelling.
Bosphorus. So he's not well.
I just can't spell. It's just
Yeah, your thumbnails will shame you eternally. They're not going away.
I mean, this is further down the straight, but it's more like this, where they've got loads of like modern buildings and stuff.
I hate the way they take such a precedence over everything. I mean, in the same way that in the West, I want the highest towers to be those on churches. In the Middle East, I want the highest towers to be those of the minarets.
Yeah.
And I can't stand, just the predominance of the uniform global skyscraper on everything.
There you go. It's a slightly bigger photo.
Oh, shut it down.
My shipping container there.
Look at that bridge. That bridge could be anywhere. You could put that. Any country could have that bridge. They couldn't even do like a Turkish-looking bridge.
It's funny actually, because this is actually,
Looks like San Francisco.
Said attacking the Victorians for their romanticizing of the Orient. Well, look what modernity has done to Orientalism today. It's destroyed. It destroyed any semblance of a unique civilization and culture, and replaced it with city skylines, bridge.
It's progress, Farrow. It's progress.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Look at the progress that we're having here.
It's Globo Homo.
Oh dear. Terrible.
Okay.
Right, so here we have Jerome, the return from the hunt.
I like this.
1878, beautiful picture.
It's absolutely lovely.
I can read you a little bit from the catalogue here. It says, Circassians, noted for their noble beauty and pale skin, came from the Caucasus Mountains and provided the Ottoman Empire with excellent horsemen and much sought-after women for their harems. Characteristically depicted on horseback, this figure of a Caucasian is one of numerous compositions of individuals or groups which record the ethnic types noted by Jerome during his visits to the Near East.
Is this a Caucasian, you're saying?
Circassian, yeah. So he's from the Caucasus, yeah.
I did not.
But obviously, he's very tanned.
I don't think this is a Circassian, my friend.
I thought he was a Bashi.
I think he's a Bashi. Yeah.
The African soldiers.
I will enlarge.
Also, yes, if anybody's wondering and didn't catch it in the last stream, the reason why all the women in many of the harem paintings appear to be white is that they were from the Caucasus. They were not from the Middle East originally.
Or they were enslaved by the Moors and sold to the Ottomans.
Yes. Although by the late 1800s, there was basically a sort of indigenous population of very, very pale-skinned women, because of the sheer numbers of them that had been imported over many hundreds of years. It's, of course, a difficult point for anybody in the modern world to even think or utter, let alone say as a fact. But, of course, historically, in pretty much all cultures around the world, the paler the skin, the more beautiful the woman. That is simply something that...
Well, it's true in Japan, where of course the women dust their faces in flour, flour from rice, which is white.
It's simply a. I mean, I personally agree with that. I think it's pretty much a statement of fact. You can go all around the world for however long you want back. It's just it's a fact. I mean, it's incredible to me that we live in an age in which you have to be careful about how you phrase it because of political circumstances, but. That's simply how it is, I think.
Just going back to the Circassians a second, I know that Semiagog, as a fan of the peoples of the Caucasus and obviously all things Turkish, did an entire stream about the history of the Circassians. So if you want to know more about them, check them out. And they're obviously famous from Lermontov's Hero of Our Time as well. That's how I encountered them for the first time. Where
Lermontov's very good.
So they're all, again, they are kind of like a peoples that are small but well known, romanticized in the West as having again, like Lermontov goes on about how beautiful the women are, how strong the horses are, how savage the men are. So there's already loads of these preconceived ideas about these kind of people, but you've got quite an interesting scene because none of the figures are facing towards us. It's a moment of rest. You've got this powerful, this is a powerful figure here. He's got his, I presume that's a gun, yeah, his musket across there.
A gun and a
chiseled.
Yeah, his kind of like hat. So he's obviously a fierce warrior, and these hounds as well. But they're taking a moment of rest and they're looking away from us. So you've got this, you've almost got this kind of oasis moment. Again, this kind of greenery blooming out in a dusty world. And again, sorry.
Well, do either of you know what type of plant that is, or anybody in the chat?
Yes, I can tell you. It's written down here. Okay, the Colchassia plant. So it's the Colchassia.
I mean, that's beautiful. If it's possible to grow them in this climate, then I may consider getting one, because that is lovely.
Just from the colours again, I love how he's like matched the dog's fur to the wall. You've got kind of like little bits of greenery going around the darkness of the horse with the kind of darkness of the kind of alcove, etc. So he's balanced the colours beautifully. We've got, again, like I said, the fact that everyone's turned away is an unbelievably difficult scene to pull off, because there's no focal point that draws us in. Normally, when you've got like even a profile of a face, you will instinctively come to that point. Maybe the dog down here, where like some of the face is revealed, and so you've got this kind of center point which pulls you in a little bit. But this is all about the little details. Again, the kind of archway across here with the kind of merkab. I can't remember the exact name of it. Again, these kind of mini sub arches that are famous in some forms of Moorish architecture.
Yeah, I mean,
very beautiful.
We simply can't overstate what an amazing draftsman and a painter this man was. I mean, look at the detail in that arched alcove there. I mean, I feel like there are so few people that could ever dream of being able to pull that off.
That is very difficult. Yeah.
And the way the dark colors seem to stand out from each other as well.
There's something really important about that, because I think that architectural drawing is a very separate kind of skill to figurative, because it's in some ways very easy, because you can use a line and rule pretty quite often and get away with it. Like, you could never use like a ruler on someone's face unless you're Picasso, and but if you make one mistake, it's really obvious. So it's a real different skill set to work on this kind of stuff here than it is to work up the these kind of beautiful, like, luscious silks reflecting in the sun. I also just shout out for this like one little white hoof, which again is just such a little detail, but adds like a lot of. Is it quite common in horses? Is it?
It's. I mean, now that I think it might catch me out. I mean, there are experts that would say, well, there's a proportionality of it, but it's fairly common to have sort of one or two white socks. My own horse is 3 white socks and one not socked, brown and white. And also, I mean, it's a quite a quaint little scene, because I've come back from a hunt and had to water the horses and the dogs, and seeing them all there around. I mean, all I'll say is it's not as calm as this when they're all watering together. I mean, the dogs tend to be
the dogs obviously
so they will throw themselves into the pond that everyone's drinking out of, or the fountain normally. And I also like the horse with its head just completely dunked into the to the water. I mean, it's a beautiful painting, this, and I suppose there is a sort of a sentimentality to it, but I think it's completely excusable, given that a real life scene such as this is quite sentimental, and it's quite, just there's a happiness to it. I don't know, which is extra impressive, given that, as you say, you can't see anybody's faces. Yeah.
One last thing I'll say on this. This really sums up some elements of Orientalism for me, which is about like degraded grandeur. You can tell that this architecture was once like totally magnificent, and it still retains that, but it has faded through time. It's kind of weathered away, etc. The same thing as this kind of pot or whatever, the water trough, it's been overgrown, and there was more stuff originally, but it's sort of nature has taken over. And again, I think that's one of the major motifs for a really good Orientalist, in my opinion, is someone who can capture this. Its splendor, but it's almost like slightly faded or rusticated.
Yes.
So this is Fromentin. The painting is called The Arab Falconer from 1863. This is a painting which is actually housed in a museum. It's in the Chrysler Museum in Norfolk, Virginia. And so here you have, I'll read from the catalogue. The Arab cavalier is the central image in Fromentin's art. His Oriental works divide fairly evenly between Arabs astride camels and those mounted on horseback. So
I have a question about the horse here, because I was always told, Panama, that we only discovered that horses go off the ground entirely when they recorded it using photography. But did they know this? Do you know about the story? Because
this was it wasn't Muybridge. It was the guy who went before Muybridge.
Is that saying that you can't see it with the naked eye?
Well, I think it was never confirmed. So it was I don't know if this is true, but there was debate whether the horse entirely left the ground as part of its stride.
Well, there are different. At a full gallop, they run not entirely dissimilar to how a human athlete would sprint. You're like throwing yourself forwards with each like stride of the leg, each push. So there is a point, depending on how you run, of course, and how a horse runs. There are different points at which I'm skeptical that it was like sort of unquantifiable, because it would simply depend on A, the horse, and B, how it was run. There are different ways that horses can gallop.
Well, also there was some argument over whether or not the front legs were aligned with the back legs, or whether you ever had this system where where the back legs were going backwards and the front legs were going front. I don't think that's possible.
Okay, I'm.
You would have at least one of the leading legs trailing, so they wouldn't both be going out forwards. So if you look up the Muybridge sequence of photographs, I think it will show you that this doesn't happen. There is always one leg under the body.
Yeah, it's a difficult technical question, I think. Like, I suppose that you theoretically could have a point at which it appeared to be,
So I don't think there's any time when they're not at least pretty much vertical. There's at least one vertical leg.
Well,
or one going angled under the body.
Yeah. As you can see in the second from the left in the top row, there it appears to be off the ground, but not in the way that it's depicted in most paintings. Because I've seen a lot of paintings in which the horse is like sort of above the ground completely, but its legs are outstretched in front and behind of it.
Yeah, that was the traditional depiction in sporting paintings, especially English sporting paintings of the 18th century.
That is a pretty wild. Also, if it was doing that, it's way too close to the ground, because it would collapse.
It really reminds me of like a horse. It's somehow like it's levitating above the ground.
When a horse jumps, it can do that. But of course, when again it's leaping over it, because horses can jump absurdly high. So that's they don't worry about coming down on their legs too hard. Yeah, but. Anyway, on to the
Sorry for that distraction. It just reminded me of that. If anyone in chat can tell me why Muybridge did this, I'd like to know. But
I can tell you. He was a photographer. He was a painter. Had a very turbulent life. I think he ended up, killing a love rival or something. And he took a whole series of photographs of animal locomotion, a famous series of animal locomotion. So it's all different types of animal in movement. So he had horses, dogs, birds, bears, and stuff, all walking. And then he also did human locomotion, which was people running, throwing stones, jumping, skipping, and he had, including women, men, old men, children, also disabled people as well. And this was just to record how they walked and how they moved, how they threw things, how they stood, and so forth. So there's a very, very famous sequence of photographs by Muybridge, which were published in the sort of 1890s, 1900 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And they were used as reference works by artists of the time.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Thanks for that. Sorry for the distraction away from that, but it just reminded me of that that sequence. So, I mean, just one thing on the falconry is quite interesting, because obviously that's something that is again is Islamic in origin, but was adopted by the medievals, I believe, through the Byzantines. So, for example, I know that Richard the Lionheart, through his contact with Sicily, which was fairly Arabicized at that time, took up hunting with the falcon. So there is some traditions. I mean, I think we should bring it back. Panama, have you ever hunted with a falcon on the horse before?
I've never done falconry. I mean, I would say that I would consider doing falconry. Doing it with a horse, no, I don't think. Until I was quite familiar with how falconry works, I've never done it. It's something that is a traditional thing, and I know that as you mentioned, the sultans of the Ottoman Empire were quite fond of it.
Is it ever done at a gallop?
I have no idea quite how it would work on horseback. I know that falconry. I know that the medieval aristocracy were quite keen on going out on horseback with a falcon on their arm to go and like catch the duck or the grouse or whatever. But I don't know really anything about it. Although, as I say, very popular among the sultans of the Ottoman Empire.
But I mean, one of the attractions or one of the themes of Orientalism is Western painters trying to capture something of the past history, not only of the East but also of the West, that was lost. Is going and finding these remnants of ancient traditions and ancient sports, which were rare in the West. So obviously falconry reminded people of medieval falconry, even though it wasn't much practiced, especially on horseback in the West in the sort of late 19th century.
I mean, this is it. This is the look right here. I mean, this guy is head to toe in ermine. He's wearing a bell for a head. He's got the horse with the fattest neck I've ever seen in my life,
and smallest head.
Horses are the enemy of artists, I think.
And then look at those stockings. I mean, this guy is pretty cool, and he's on a falconry. Okay, sorry, we keep getting distracted. We have to focus on this. So, is he just? You were saying that this guy is just a falcon hunter, and we've just kind of captured this.
Yeah, there's no other information. I think it's just sort of like a generic type. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the painting's painted relatively loosely, but you've got that dynamism at the same time. You've got the kind of large kind of cloud. We're meant to look up to the falcon, but there's also a bit of an angle going ahead. If you see the kind of two lines, the lines of the horse's legs creating horizontal, and this diagonal as well, almost pointing forwards like a big arrow. So you've got that sense of movement. And then you can feel like the wind on the turban, etc. I mean, it's certainly dynamic, but it's not one of my favorite paintings we've seen so far. But it was a pretty well done horse, apart from the pose, as we've discussed.
Okay, this is Dunois. This is Le Comte Dunois again, the guard of the Seraglio, souvenir of Cairo, 1876. So the Seraglio is just the living quarters of Ottomans, and this is apparently this was related to his Le Comte de Noailles went to Cairo, I believe, in 1872. So this is painted afterwards from his direct observation. This may not be accurate, but it's based on things that he saw. Yeah. So this is just a scene of guards resting And again, you have the Harem in the background.
Oh yeah, it's interesting with the birds. I mean, it's quite again a novel scene. This is the first scene where we've had just black people in the painting, which is quite interesting. You've obviously got it's sunset. You can feel like the heat in the place, and so everyone's kind of like lying down without sheets, just on one big rug. But you've got like a series of really interestingly done figures. Just from a technical perspective, it's very difficult. You're looking at it from like a 3/4 lengthways on. It's like
and a lot of foreshortening.
Yeah, exactly. This is probably the easiest figure to do because you're almost like side on. But again, some very difficult poses. So again, shows the technical ability. You've got this kind of brilliant figure at the top here. So is he's the guy that they're guarding, is he?
Yeah, I mean, it says that they're. It talks about them being eunuchs.
Okay.
So I guess if they're the household guards, then it's quite possible that they would be eunuchs because they'd be in contact with the women, the wives.
Yeah. Well, you've got this feeling of like casualness, the heat. You can see kind of this guy kind of laid back on his arm. These guys do not seem like a particularly strong fighting force. They're very kind of luxuriant and lazy. So, I guess that's the kind of guard you need for a harem. It's not exactly going to be attacked all the time, is it?
Yeah, I mean, you're behind the front lines in any war that's being fought. So they're not frontline troops.
But just in terms of like capturing that kind of mystery, that kind of sensation of being there, I think it's a really nicely done painting.
Apparently, this is the Harem Pavilion at the Gazara Palace on the island of the same name, looking northeast across the Nile, and in the background is the mosque of Sinan Pasha.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so it's based on a real scene, but obviously the figures have been arranged for it.
I'm just sort of like staring at the picture. it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, he's sort of hit and miss really. I think this one and the Eunuch one, the Eunuch Dreaming is particularly successful.
Yeah, very nice. He's kind of divided up into these little spaces as well, so you can spend a bit of time looking at the cityscape, and again, do you remember all the way back to that Jerome? They're praying on the rooftops. It's all about the minarets. It's about the domes
and the crescent moon.
Yeah, exactly. But then, like I said, you got this kind of another like mini scene here of the guys lying down, and then, like I said, this almost kind of regal royal position at the top here. So I think that's a really interesting composition, executed very well. So, and anything to say, Panama, or should we move on?
I don't know. I mean, everything has kind of been covered that I would have said. I mean, we've already talked quite at length about the African troops in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, I absolutely, Farrah, as you pointed out on the last stream, I love these huge like belts just stuffed with pistols and knives and muskets, and just an entire array of weaponry carried around the waist. Enormously practical.
Yeah, I think there's something about that as well around Oriental themes, which is again just like that kind of degraded beauty that I mentioned beforehand. Just like in practical weapons of war, some of these muskets. If you go to the Welcome collection, they have a most excellent selection of certainly Renaissance muskets and the like. And I think there are a few.
That's specifically why I went there actually was to look at the firearms.
But I think they have got some Ottoman ones there, and some of the kind of ivory work on them is it's exquisite. And again, I think at that kind of late Victorian period, you're reaching an age where efficiency is taking over in the minds of everyone, where they're creating more and more vicious weapons of war, which have had that kind of beauty stripped away from them. It's not necessarily about creating these kind of lovely objects of death. It's about just creating, how can I kill the most, when's the famous needle gun is produced in like 10 years time.
Needle gun. Mass produced.
So again, it's kind of, I think there is the novelty of weapons, and you know, a Victorian would probably like laugh at this kind of guard regiment as being totally ineffectual. But
well, I mean, the thing is, of course, these weapons, these sort of Afghan and Ottoman muskets, were custom made to their users. They were made by the famous gunsmiths of Constantinople or Damascus or Kabul or anywhere like these places, and the people that worked in them were really more artists than they were gunsmiths. You know, they make, you know, look at these things. I mean, and the thing is as well, those troops that are just, you know, lounging there, those are professional, lifelong warriors. Those are not like British conscripts with a brown vest or
not entirely practical. I think this is slightly ornamental.
But
no,
still,
they're like them. A lot
functional.
of them are like them.
The aesthetics of war are being respected here, and that's what I very much like about this. You know,
Okay.
I have many times considered buying in auctions an old Afghan or Persian musket just to display somewhere, but of course they always end up going for like 40 grand, you know, because they're very sought after collector's items.
If you seriously, Alex, if you look at it, a lot of them are like that. Look, this one in tortoise shell. Who thinks I'm going to put head to toe tortoise shell on this musket? Seriously,
be proud to carry one of these into battle, wouldn't you?
Anyway, it was just a nice little aside there.
So somebody in the chat asks about the bird on the left. Do you know what that is?
I mean, I think it's a crane. I'm looking to see if it is mentioned in the catalogue. It's not mentioned specifically in the catalogue, no.
The Nile's quite famous for having cranes in it, and again, if there is literally like the Egyptian crane god as well. So it could be a symbol of the Nile. There is an interesting interplay. I don't know if you've seen the dog across here, or is it even a puma panther or something? I tried to find a high res photo, but I couldn't.
Well, it wouldn't, if it's an Islamic society, it wouldn't be a dog. It would be a puma or a
So it's
cat.
I think it's kind of wearing off this crane across here. Can you see it's kind of like snarling in that direction, and the kind of birds reacting to it. So again, I think I quite like it as like the symbol of the guards here, where again it's kind of quite sleek and black and sitting in the distance, but it's kind of like it is warding off anyone who would be wanting to try and get access at the same time. That's what their job is.
Mm-hmm.
He is this guy here. He is the puma. Everyone else is just pretty lazy, but I don't want to mess with this guy. Okay. Right. So we're on to the leotard section. So if it's okay, what I wanted to do is just to spend 5 minutes just talking through a little bit of more of the background about Jerome, because I think he's such a cool figure, and what. Just some of the things I think is interesting about him. Now, like we mentioned last time, I think he is basically been forgotten by the modern canon. People know his paintings, but don't know who he was. He was described by the 1990s, that, however, as the world's most famous artist. So I think it's interesting how he's kind of lost this.
The 1890s, you mean?
Yeah, sorry. Exactly. Yeah. Him and Tracy Emin. No,
that would have been that would be a conversation I'd love to hear.
But you can see already this is a gent who is a bit of a character. He's got a great moustache, brilliant hair. He started by painting with some of the French masters from an early age. Won multiple awards. Again, it's sort of sickening to see his career because he's just so good from the start. One of his kind of early paintings is these kind of cocks fighting, and as we saw with Jerome's gladiator painting last time, he definitely swings between the classical and the orient at the same time, and those are kind of his two poles he switches between. This is the kind of painting that made him, but again, very early on into his career, where he's producing like such wonderful painting. I mean, look at the feathers on the birds.
Well, I think they were seen very much as a crossover. The ancient world and the Orientalists and the Oriental scenes were seen as sort of pretty much equivalent, because there was this sort of idea, slightly false idea, that the Orient had remained untouched by modernity. So they were seen as sort of correlative.
Interesting. Yeah. But you do tend to have artists who can specialize in one or the other. I think, again, like Alma I mentioned.
Usually. It is interesting that he moves between the two.
And at different stages in his life as well. I think, I don't know if we did this Napoleon one last time, but he's also famous for doing scenes like Diogenes in his little pot, other kind of like brilliant classical moments.
That's him, is it? The Diogenes painting.
Yeah, well, this is it. I think there's so many paintings of him, of his work. You'd be like,
the cockfight is very famous.
Yeah, as well. One of my particular favorites is actually this Harem painting that we didn't have a chance to do last time.
This is on the cover of the Harem book. So if you're looking up this book on the internet, the Harem book that I recommended, this is on the cover. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and because it's got just like a couple of little mini scenes going on. You've got so much feeling. You've got some of the kind of sensualness. You've got this kind of like fine fine curves from this woman, but it's done in a tasteful way.
Very diplomatic, Farah.
It's done in a very tasteful way at the same time that I think balances the beauty of the human body without being licentious.
It is quite a stark hip to waist ratio, though, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got these other little characters and moments going on. You've got the the hooker, the kind of hooker woman going around. Yeah, exactly. Just trying to hassle everyone.
Mango, apple.
Yeah, exactly. You've got figures like this really like sad little figure across here, all clothed up, looking down at the pool.
She's not sat with the others.
Yeah, exactly. You've got someone kind of looking behind them. You've got these kind of figures in the half lights, but again, just beautifully rendered in this kind of classical pose. And then just again this amazing architectural detail. Just the hassle of painting this. It's just this is just some tedious artistic work, but again executed so well.
I couldn't imagine painting that like that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm not an architectural painter. It's just so much work.
It's just boring. I've got to be honest with you. This is boring work. But he just mashes it, and again, just things like just look at the reflection of the tiles and stuff.
Nothing has been skimped on here.
Yeah.
So that's what I was talking about, reflective color.
Yeah. You can see the blue there.
Also, I mean, was it mentioned that he was a very prominent master teacher?
I think yes, he was. Yeah, he was very famous. He taught all sorts of artists, including some who went on to be Orientalists, but others who went on to become realists. Eakins, who was a famous American realist, went to study under Jerome in the 1860s, I think it was, and he came back, and actually he was basically the leading light of realism in Philadelphia when he came back.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really exquisite piece. I mean, I think I've definitely seen it before, but I've never really studied it before like this. I mean, I'm quite taken by it.
One last thing I'd say is just on the colours, where again he's got that kind of classic white and blue thing going on, maybe a bit of blue and yellow as well, but then he sneaks in the green and reds of the rug, uses it, and then you've got the shisha pipe and stuff like that. That's how he can anchor it. The reds of the head and the flower and stuff. It's just a really sneaky, adding in a bit of complexity to the kind of color landscape there. More classics. This is Makatos Botsaris, which again is one of these traveling mercenary guys. Not mercenary. I think they're just soldiers. And again, I just think capturing that kind of moment of, or like the character of the person perfectly, where he's obviously a guy you don't want to mess with, but he's kind of unserious and casual at the same time. Just the way he's leaning his body down on the chair, I think, makes him really interesting. And again, just the attention
Only
to
you
detail.
knew how bad things really were.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel.
Ashes of Civilization.
Yeah, did we do this one as well? I think last
I
time.
don't think so.
No, I think we did something similar, but he did a lot of bathing paintings.
Yeah, he did a lot of bathing, and again, there's quite a famous one. I don't know if I put it in there, of like a woman emerging out of the well. I think we did that in the Symbolist Dream, maybe. But he likes kind of like cavernous objects on the side. But you got these coming up, but I just love the big Ottoman shoes,
bathing shoes.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, I love that tiny corner bath. Like it's really compact, isn't it? The fountain or the bath, there.
Yeah.
There's just something so wonderful about all these paintings and the scenes they capture. Where I don't know if any of this exists anymore in the modern day. None of this is still around. Also, what are these things that they're sat? Also, I love him sneaking his name into the corner there. Did you see that? But the things that they're sat on. What are these? Are these just like interesting stools or crates?
Yeah, I think these are just sort of specialist stools. That you didn't want anything. You wanted to be sort of relatively light, I suppose, and also if it's going to get wet, you want it to sort of dry off fairly quickly.
Yeah. Also, note the what is that? I can't think of the word now.
Manacle.
The manacle around the ankle there.
Yeah. Again, that's a great touch to kind of show.
Yeah.
Like, this looks like a free woman, and then actually no, it's the.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, is it
a bangle? You're thinking?
I don't know.
Maybe that's.
It could be. It could be. I mean, it might be
one
sort
of them.
Might be an ornamental manacle.
Yeah.
It's another classic. This is the Mufti reading in his prayer stool. This is going to be
that's AA. Yeah.
I was going to say this is the AA in a couple of years' time.
This is a glimpse of AA Lodge.
Yeah. Except he's holding a phone.
Yeah.
If it's AA Lodge, but yeah, that is incredible. I love all the paintings of. I believe that I'm thinking about it. It must be a Jean-Léon Gérôme painting, but it's of a Muslim cleric on the floor reading an enormous Quran or book of prayers or some kind of enormous text. And I'm trying to. I can't. I should have sent it as a link, I suppose, or contributed it. But yeah, it's got this sort of vibe to it. The scholar poring over the great tome in the Middle East. It's just something wonderful about it.
But he does something with a perspective here that again is really hard to pull off. Can you see the additional foreshortening on this side? So you get a real feel like you're placed really close to it. Again, it's hard to describe. Just follow the lines of the wood across here. The diagonals down are very tight across here, while they're kind of longer across there, which means you get a bit of a fisheye almost effect. So it kind of the stool comes out you more in the painting. So it's a real sneaky.
It's very much related to techniques you would use for architectural painting.
Again, yeah. I wish we had more time to go through them all, but I want to just show you a couple of others.
I thought of including this one. This one's beautiful.
Yes, exactly. And so the Bashis were like again another kind of Ottoman regiment, famous for having that kind of the kind of cloven sword, pistols, etc. But also this kind of beautiful silks. But this almost reminds me of like a high Renaissance painting, like a Lotto or like a Titian, where they're
it's a Venetian in color, really, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. But then he's kind of taken it to the next level with just some of the level of detail. There's more realism inside there, and again, this is just about showing that the skill of silk painting just there is amazing. So
shall I tell you what it says in the catalogue? It says the Bashi Bazouk was a mercenary soldier belonging to the irregular troops of the Turkish army. Racially diverse, they were unpaid but supported themselves by living off permitted plunder. They were also notorious for their lawlessness and savage brutality.
Yes.
Nice.
There was I I'm not sure where I was looking at it, but there was a painting I saw recently of a one of these troops, attacking some women in the Caucasus or somewhere like that. They as it was pointed out there, they were quite known for that. Also, was this an actual troupe that sat for Jerome to paint, or was this done?
I think so. Yeah, I think he found someone, and I also certainly he had a couple of people that he knew quite well. So,
what do you chaps make of the way that the sitter is posed, sort of away from the viewer?
But that's why I say it is slightly Renaissance-y in that regard, because again, it's a slightly difficult, challenging pose. I mean, the classic is the profiled face, but the fact that it's the back towards you makes it more difficult, I think. But also creates a bit of an interesting moments. Again, like I said, I feel like this is all about the silks for me, and him kind of saying, "Look how good I am at textures." Basically, the face in many ways doesn't have much attention to it. Look how much shadow it's on it. There's not a huge amount of detail on it. I think it's it's secondary to the weaponry.
I would say that it's definitely related. This is definitely a reference back to Titian, because Titian used to do this with sort of the elbow coming out and the silks and everything. And I would also say that what he probably did is he probably put the shoulder out. Yeah, I mean that's the classic one. So that's Titian from sort of like 1510 or something.
Look even at the background there. He's used similar tones and stuff. I swear this is him just being like, I'm basically.
This is me doing my own. And I think also he's turned away the front, because the front would have had like obviously the sash, and then you'd have the hilts, and you'd have the hilts of the guns and the sword and so forth. So it would have. And so it would have covered up the pink. It would have distracted. So to get like that real flash of pink, what he did was he just went for the shoulder. I think that's why he did it.
Sorry, I'm just trying to bring them both up at the same time. Impossible. Stupid.
Yeah, because Windows 10 is that annoying thing where it minimizes all the others when you put that to half screen, doesn't it? One tab.
There we go. Very good, Jerome. This is just like him being smug.
He did it really well.
Jean-Leon.
Yeah. Okay. Just another little cheeky one I found that I thought was quite charming. This is obviously the Wailing Wall. I think we've all seen Trump there paying his respects to.
Oh yes.
I was going to say something then, but
gonna get the channel taken down again.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I really like this scene, and again, it's interesting to see the Orthodox Jew.
Enormous stovepipe hat.
Well, exactly. They got the hat, but then he's still got the kind of Ottoman silks and stuff. So I like this. This is just imagine today if all the Orthodox Jews were still dressed in the kind of Ottoman style.
Yeah.
Just these like bright colours and fabrics.
Again, back to my earlier point. Imagine seeing the Wailing Wall with like one person there paying their respects or doing a prayer. I mean, it's always like teeming with millions of people nowadays, isn't it? I mean, it's a tourist.
It's a tourist thing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So. Oh lordy. There you go.
That's it. That's on there we go. That's probably what it looks like on most days. Dear me. I mean, there's too many people on this earth nowadays. I think there's just
You and the Rockefeller Foundation. But we better not talk about that. We really will get taken down.
Oh dear.
I just wanted to finish up with just like the fact how awesome Jerome was by saying that he got an award from the Prussians, which was like very rare for the time. So kind of literally recognised by the kind of imperial Prussians. And there's two brilliant quotes from him that I've had to put into Notepad because I'm a boomer. So the first one I'll just read out, and this was him kind of talking through his memoirs a little bit here. At the time, Paris had nothing to do with the Paris of today. No railways, no bicycles, no cars. We were less agitated, and certain districts, among others, the one we lived in, which we called the Latin Quarter, had a provincial aspect in their calm and tranquility. Now everything has changed. We no longer walk. We run like crazy. If we are not crushed during the day, we have a good chance of being murdered at night. This charming. We have witnessed the end of a world. We're witnessing the dawn of a new one, which lacks the picturesque and above all serenity. The day is not far off when, through our customs, our ways of being, our love of the dollar, ori sacra fames, which is the curse of money, we will no longer be French, neither in spirit nor in heart. Horrible to be think of. We will be Americans. And I just absolutely loved Bass Jerome dropping some truth, and it made me think about part of Orientalism was about trying to capture these kind of last little magical moments of a beautiful civilization long faded. And I just feel like maybe Jerome was like feeling it for himself. He could feel his own civilization around him slipping away,
revolting against the modern world.
You could say that.
Do you know what? We're all complete muppets and we don't know what we're talking about. Do you know why? That bird is the ibis.
Oh, of course.
It's not stork or crane. It's an ibis.
Yeah, we missed that one.
So that was one that was going to be on our correction list for next time.
Yeah, there we go. We got that one. Yeah. Whoops.
The second Jerome quote was around the I can't say this Calboat bequest.
Calabot.
Okay, there you go. And basically he bequested a ton of impressionist paintings to it was either the Louvre or like the main national.
It was the
Institut de France maybe. Now this is his thoughts on the impressionists here. The Institut de France cannot remain still before such a scandal. How could the government dare to welcome such a collection of an analyses?
You have to do the accent.
Into a museum? No. Why have you seen the collection? The state, the world of such junk. What lessons are young artists going to receive from now on? They'll all start. Okay, it's going to turn. I'm going to
hello.
Exactly.
The paintings of Madonna with the big
Impressionism.
They'll all start to impressionism. These people believe they are painting nature. Nature's so admirable in all its manifestations. What pretension! Nature is not for them. This Monet, do you remember his cathedral? And that man used to know how to paint. Yes, I've seen good things by him, but now! Exclamation mark. Bass Jerome strikes again, and I feel like again this is probably why he has been unpersoned from the modern canon for his visceral attack.
He's just too based.
He was. I mean, just look at this guy. Yeah, he was too based to exist in modernity.
Enters your academy, savages impressionism, refuses to elaborate further, leaves.
Exactly. Slags off the Americans, leaves.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to head back to the last part of your section now, Alex.
Yeah. So this is relatively quick. So this is Jean-Etienne Lyotard, who was French Swiss. What do you think this is painted in? Without zooming in.
Ink.
Panama.
Looking at the clothing, it does look sort of like pen and ink.
Almost. So this is pastel or pastel if you're American.
Okay.
He was a famous pastelist. And this was so this says basically so this is Lyotard of Geneva, called the Painter Turk, painted by himself in Vienna in 1744. He was well known because he went to Constantinople and he drew Orientalist subjects. So this is before Orientalism hit high gear. So this is 18th century. And he was famous for basically dressing as a Turk and understanding the customs of the Turk and speaking Turkish and so forth. Even though he didn't spend, I think he spent a reasonable amount of time in Constantinople, and he was best known for drawing, or you actually say painting with pastels, for drawing Western diplomats and families of Western traders and so on wearing Oriental clothing when they were visiting Constantinople. And this was part of his gimmick. This was his thing. This was how he sold himself when he came back to Paris and so forth, and in Vienna.
I like he's got like a big bushy COVID beard here.
Yep. So he's wearing this, and he's got his beard out like this in Vienna.
Again, this feels like a personal branding kind of thing. You know, it's kind of like, aren't I a kooky guy? I dress like a Turk. It's me. I'm the Turk guy.
It's Russell Brand, isn't it?
he just looks like Russell Brand, actually.
That's a bit unfair. Come on now.
True.
Yeah.
So next one is, so you remember those famous the famous shoes that were seen in the first part. We saw them just recently in the Jerome painting of the Baths, but these were also in the Jerome painting of the Baths right at the beginning of the first part. So this is a Frankish woman and her maid servant. So again, like Frankish, of course, so she's from Germany. So she's a visitor. She's not actually, well, unless she is a concubine, she will be a visitor. And this was drawn by him, I think, when he was in Constantinople.
Again, it's impressive for pastels because it's obviously a very different medium, but he's still getting some, like, I feel like the girl on the left is the better of the two figures, but the detail on the silks is quite excellent.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. Sorry.
Are those this may seem odd. Are those like porcupine spikes in the headdress on the taller one?
Just look a bit like it.
No, I think that they're threaded. They're threaded sort of beads. You know, like sort of tubular beads. Not tubular bells, but tubular beads.
Yeah.
And the fingertips are dyed in henna, I presume.
Was that a custom?
I wasn't aware of that, but I mean, obviously, this is what it is, and the girl also, I think. So maybe it was the fashion of the time.
Okay.
Incredible.
Yeah. So this is so here we have the Oriental as Orientalists. This is painting by Osman Hamdi Bey, who was an Ottoman or Turkish administrator, archaeologist, painter, and he studied under Jerome. Very good, Panama.
Yeah.
This is the chess game from 1896. So this is, obviously, we talked about Westerners going to the East and depicting the East and recording it for Western consumption. Here is an Eastern painter depicting the East, and he was selling and exhibiting in Paris in the Salon and so forth. But obviously, now recently, in recent decades, a lot of these painters have been snapped up by rich collectors in the Middle East.
Fantastic, though. I mean, I love these scenes from like everyday life in the Middle East, in which there's an aesthetic for everything, which I think is something that by this point was beginning to die. Well, it pretty much had died in the West as a concept, long ago. But like in the Middle East and the further east you go, and all around the world, there are aesthetics for everything. And you can see that here. Just two chaps playing a game or something in the streets, with a vendor behind them, doing whatever. And as you say, Pharaoh, the decayed grandeur of all the buildings is remarkable.
Just going back to some of the points around colonialization, I think it's obviously striking how similar this is to everything we've seen beforehand. And again, it's kind of like, this is probably the strongest defense of Oriental art from a colonization perspective, because, this is literally a native painting in a similar style. And if anything, like, I think it's actually less romantic. It's kind of like a bit more derelict. It's kind of like, I feel like it's actually a harsher representation, more realistic, where I feel like someone like Jerome would have, put in like some nature in the place instead. But this guy's just kind of shown all the kind of smashed tiles, or kind of like the dirty blackness of the column across there. But I love this figure here. This is a great a great pose. We've all been there. We've just done an absolute smug, brilliant move in chess, and this smug
Scholar's
and this
mate.
guy, he's about to get wrecked.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, this is me playing a game of Civ 5 with friends. Just,
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think I'm sure that the decolonizers would say that this guy's been propagandized or whatever.
Internalized Orientalism.
Crafty
Turk.
You
There's literally no winning.
No.
But I think for the rational man looking at this, like I said, it's
the man with a brain.
It defends the whole genre very well, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we come up to very last paintings here. We're going to go through these relatively quickly because, maybe it's worth talking about these under a different sort of banner if we talked about Impressionism or whatever. So this is Frederic Bazille, 1841 to 1870, La Toilette. He was associated with Impressionists. He didn't become an Impressionist because he basically died before Impressionism really got up to full steam. He died in the Franco-Prussian War, and this was basically his last painting, his last masterpiece. So here you have it's an Orientalist scene, but clearly, if you look at the dress of the woman on the right, that kind of suggests that this is actually set in Paris, in contemporary Paris. He never went to the East, so this is perhaps sort of like an Orientalist take on life in Paris in 1870.
There's something about like the two dresses here, the Oriental dress versus the Western dress. She's literally
and the cloth she's holding, that looks Japanese or Chinese.
Yes,
so it looks like a mishmash, doesn't it?
Mm.
I love the way that woman is just sprawled on the bed.
Someone in the chat says it looks a bit OnlyFans. And it does slightly.
No, there's no way any of the sorts of people that frequent that pit would have aesthetics like this. You're not going to see a real fur chaise or
how do you know? Have you visited?
No, I've never visited, but I have a hunch. I mean, if anybody does know of an OnlyFans model that is got to this level of aesthetic grandeur, then why they
someone send out a tweet to the Britisher.
Yeah, someone asked the Britisher.
Will know, yes.
Know. I mean, look at the quality of the fabrics and the way everybody's dressed and the wall. I mean, is that paper or a painted pattern on the wall?
I think it's a carpet.
I think it looks like a carpet, doesn't it?
Oh yes,
the patterns are too big really to be wallpaper.
Yes, that's probably true. I mean, look at the grandeur of this. I mean, this is not something that you're going to get nowadays on any sort of platform, let alone a pornography one.
The only thing I want to say is that he's obviously managed to source like the African servant as well to help out as part of that. So again, I think it's interesting how there's that connection between the Orient at the same time, and especially with France and its various colonial connections would have access to those people in Paris as well. But there's something about like this is all about fitting. Like she's putting on the shoes. They're testing something. They're trying something out. It's kind of like there is something LARPy about it because it is about you're wearing a bit of a costume and it's part of a game kind of thing. That's the kind of vibes.
There's also something rather maybe it's just the quality of the image I'm seeing, but there's something a bit haughty to the woman's face. There's something not quite so serene or blissful.
I wouldn't say it's full on melancholia or whatever, but there's something about her.
I mean,
ennui, fashionable ennui.
No, very exactly.
I mean, I'm sure all of us are familiar with the condition of a woman who is trying to get dressed for something or go somewhere and sort something out. Not the happiest experience, it seems. So I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting, though.
So this is Renoir. This is Odalisque from 1870. So this is one of the Impressionists, an early painting from one of the Impressionists. Renoir Renoir, kind of a based character if you look into his biography. So
Okay, interesting.
What was the name?
not-
Sorry. Oh,
Renoir.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. We'll get into that here, but so this is. I think this is. Is it Nanette? I think it's. Anyway, it's his mistress, and she's dressed up in Orientalist gear. Renoir went to Algeria and did some painting there. He actually did more landscapes than figure works there. And Renoir, obviously most famous for his landscapes, but also his nudes. This is an early painting. It's a sort of masterpiece, an early masterpiece of him showing his lover in Algerian or Oriental garments.
Hell of an expression there.
Yeah.
Something a bit strange going on.
Well, it's not exactly sensual.
No,
but her head's tipped back, and it's creating that kind of double, like a rather unattractive double chin. Her eyes are kind of like semi-closed, and you're sort of getting a bit of you're sort of looking at the face slightly from below. So that's why it's basically, I would say, an unattractive face of what would probably be an attractive woman if you dressed her up nicely.
yeah,
But it's creating that kind of illusion of kind of just resting down there. Maybe she's kind of like, again, that kind of stoned in the harem vibe. And again, the way he's painted her is quite sickly as well. There's a lot of yellows in her skin,
grey around the mouth, and
her headdress is falling off. There's something kind of dishevelled about it. So
decadent.
yeah, I feel like it's meant to be her as like in one of these pleasure palaces, like just one of those figures that you would find as you kind of walk through it, as opposed to this dream-like sensuous vixen that would be in a Jerome painting. You know,
it's about her.
Yeah, it's intentionally disturbing. And again, like the arch of the feet, again, that there's something about that as well, where again it's either tension or, you know, he's put that in for a reason. It's not just a foot kind of laid out. You only arch it when you're placing emphasis on the kind of ball of your foot. So there's an awkwardness to this whole picture. There's also like some kind of weird stuff going on with perspective. It's obviously a relatively realist painting, but again, you can see where there's quite a lot of abstraction going on with this poof. And also, I feel like he's not done the perspective right on it. I think it could be intentional. And again, just like the orange has been reduced to like a couple of daubs of orange. So it's an interesting like flux point between full on impressionism, and some of this kind of oriental realism.
Indeed.
Right. So you remember this is Gauguin, Breton Girls Dancing 1888. So this is in Breton. So this is northern France. Now, of course, the reason I included this was because when we started the stream on the first in the first part, we talked about Orientalism, and I said that basically Orientalism, the critique of Orientalism is nonsense, because the sort of objectifying, exoticizing search for authentic rustic life was something that was not just applied to the East, it was applied to the West, and it was applied to rural regions of the West. And so here we have an example of Gauguin doing a little bit of, seeking out sort of primitive types in the Breton in provincial France, basically. So I think this is kind of like an interesting intro into why he got into Orientalism, which we will cover just very briefly. And this is a painting that he did in, this is Mango Pickers. This is from 1887, the previous year. And this is when he went to Panama hat there. And he went to, had to mention it, and Martinique, French possession. I think Panama was actually a French possession at this time as well.
I don't know about Panama being a French possession. That was Spanish until, and then the Colombia, it was part of Colombia until
okay, so maybe the French were there building the canal, but it wasn't actually French.
Yes, that would have, there would have, the French would have been there building the canal.
Because they initiated the canal, didn't they?
Yes, it was the French attempt failed, and that's why the Americans took over.
So basically, so he went to Panama, and it was horrible, and there was lots of mosquitoes, and he went with a painter called Charles Laval. See my review on my website about this. And they both got sick, and it was horrible, and they didn't like it, and they went to Martinique, and in search of local color. So they were interested in the Creoles and the local indigenous culture, the former slave culture. So this is one of his paintings that he did in search of this sort of quote unquote primitive authenticity. And this is a painting that he did in Tahiti. So 3 Tahitians. This is 1896. So he went to Tahiti in the mid 1890s, and he stayed there on and off for the last 10 years of his life. And
just before we go any further, would it be correct to say that around the turn of the century or around this era, there was a big fascination with African and apparently primitive areas of the world in art, that they were trying to capture the authenticity of it? Or
yes, there was. So this was basically the end of the high period of empire. So you had sort of lots of these international expositions which were bringing in sort of live examples of the colony. They sort of transported over sort of whole villages, miniature villages, and complete with people for these displays. And they were in these sort of international expositions for sort of 6 months or 9 months at a time. And this is when primitivism seems to become a source of modernism. So Gauguin especially, but of course then it becomes in for Picasso, and also it comes in for the Expressionists, which I think we've mentioned previously, where the Expressionists sort of saw that the primitive life as a counterweight for the deracinating influence of civilization and culture.
I would say that it's limited to the avant-garde, though, because again, I think we see the world through the modern canon, which is kind of like Picasso landed and then everyone loved him and he was like the #1 artist in the world, and it's like that's just not true. Where academic and realist paintings up until really like the 1910, maybe even the 1950s.
You've got like Bouguereau, and you've got Jerome. Jerome dies in 1905, and they're still painting and the academic painters and the symbolist painters, who we remember we've done several streams on them. They were still working in relatively realistic terms, and this is the juncture where the end of academic art. I mean, there's a hard cutoff in 1914 when basically academic art does die.
Yeah, exactly. But I would describe this as kind of like the like an undercurrent or something like that. There is this rumbling going on, especially with young painters. But I would not describe it as mainstream by any means till later. But I think we need to leave it at that. I think it's been a really interesting travel through.
Yeah, these have been brilliant.
Orientalism. We may do another stream on it at a later date, but I think we've covered off most things. I had a section on Holman Hunt, but I will maybe reserve him for another time, just for the sake of.
Well, I think he'd be interesting to talk about in another stream, because then you could talk about pre-Raphaelitism, you could talk about the English in India and the Far East. So that might make for a nice separate stream, maybe a little later on once we've tackled some other stuff.
Yeah,
very good.
But chaps, any kind of finishing comments on Orientalism, things you wanted to show or you've learnt on the journey?
I'm gonna, because I bring anti-modernism into everything. It seems to me, from a reactionary kind of point of view, the fascination with this kind of art is that it shows you a pretty recent civilization that was couched in a beautiful aesthetic, a love for particular types of women, and particularly in that field, lots of obsessions with beauty. It was an aristocratic and a society run by noblemen and princes. It was a society which was bathed in a kind of localist interpretation of an orthodox faith, similar to how Christian Europe used to be, in which, so everybody is technically following the words of the Pope in Rome, say, or the Caliph in Constantinople, but every region has its own local way of practicing that faith, and every caste, every culture, every class has its own ways of doing things, and you have the wonderful grandeur of all the buildings that are just aged in their own ways, and you can see the history of the land in front of you, and you can see the craftsmanship, and you can see the individuality of the people. Every profession has its own look. Every warrior has his own type of musket and sword and dagger, and they all these ways of practicing things which have been around for hundreds of years. And I think that's what actually drew the interest of the Orientalists in the first place, was the fact that around the time they were living, the West was rapidly losing all of that. It just wasn't there anymore. Everything was becoming uniform and dull and infested with progressive forms of thought. So, I mean, there's a real kind of reveling in the traditionalism of the things depicted in the Oriental movement, and the kind of spiritualism and the passion that's all there that they did go and see in the Middle East at that time, which is, of course, no longer there now in any substantial way. So that's basically my main thought on the whole kind of Orientalist movement.
Alex?
Well, I think I've said plenty already, but just to say that I think it's been a really fun couple of streams. I mean, all the streams have been fun, and this has been particularly interesting because I know that a lot of people who are watching, and thanks for the interaction, and remember to hit that like button and share and subscribe and all that. That I think we've
colonize that like button. Colonize the like button.
Colonize.
That's it.
Subalternize that like button.
Exactly. Yeah.
So thanks for the feedback, and I know that this is an underserved area. There are some books out there. You can get some secondhand, like the book that I recommended is available, and I would say that I really like exploring these areas of art that kind of bywaters. I mean, I know that we might get onto stuff like Impressionism and Expressionism and stuff at some future stage, but I would say that certainly academic painting and Oriental painting is absolutely key to understanding the history of art, and a lot of it is just wonderful stuff.
Just my thoughts that, in some ways, just following on from what Panama was saying, I feel like the entire genre is a bit like it's like a eulogy for a moment in time that these guys could see was disappearing in front of them, and they were sort of just capturing this moment. Again, there's so many scenes where it's a sun setting or the light going down, and I feel like that's part of the kind of just general feeling as well. Just there's like a fleeting ethereal nature to the whole thing, and this idea of the fantasy, and I feel like part of the problem of today is that our dreams are very mundane and boring, and I think there's more depth and an imagination in one of these scenes of a mercenary warrior than there is in the dreams of a thousand men today. So there is something, there's a sad quality, I think, to the entire genre that makes it that gives it a kind of a timeless feel. So
and there's such a pure authenticity to everything that's being shown. Like that cleric in his booth. Do you think he's there thinking like, I wonder how I'm going to water down my? He's not like some modern Church of England, vicar who's there, talking about completely ineffectual ways of thinking, or you think those troops, the African troops, are lying in front of the pavilion. Do you think they're there thinking about the ills of the Ottoman Empire or whatever, or I don't have a purpose in life? It's like, of course they're not. They're absolutely living more so in that moment than any of us in the modern world really live, in our entire lives. It comes through so powerfully to me, at least.
Okay, wonderful. Let's finish up then. So, chaps, is there anything you would like to shill at all? Alex, I know you have an announcement.
Yeah, so basically, thank you for everyone who's already bought copies of my books. It's much appreciated, and these books are still available. There are also some books on poetry that are around. Maybe, Farah, if you could get up that image of the cover. Do you remember?
Apologies, I forgot to mention
there
this.
There you are. So this is on art too. This is one of my books. So this is actually a drawing of, someone mentioned Flaubert in Cairo. Flaubert visited Cairo, and this is a drawing of Flaubert actually posing in Cairo in front of those sort of dilapidated houses. I've got 3 books of poems that are available on Amazon. Yes, I know Amazon is horrible, but if you actually go to the WordPress website, you can find ways of ordering those not through Amazon. So you can also buy another way. So those include original poems and drawings by me. There is linked a sort of an Amazon wish list. So if you would like to support me in writing my articles, my books, or preparing for these streams, you can help me directly by buying one of these books, and it will get sent to me. This is a research list, so it ranges from paperback books on art history starting at about £5, and it goes up from there. So if you feel like supporting my work directly, you can do that, and that would be very much appreciated. But you don't have to, and just carry on watching. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's in the description, so check it out. At the very least, it gives you some ideas for books
for reading. Yes,
yourself.
it's a good reading list as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Panama?
I have nothing to show at the moment. I've been very busy of late, but you'll be hearing more from me on my channel, and I'll probably be on more streams the coming few weeks. I may.
You're on a semi-agog stream, aren't you? Soon, is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. This coming Wednesday, we'll be talking about the British public school, its history, and its effects on Britain's past and its empire, and what we're going to talk about those kind of schools as a historical curiosity and an example of molding young men into something better, essentially.
Yeah, I can guarantee that'll be good. And Dee's got some great stories of growing up and etc. So be sure to tune in.
There's an interesting question in chat, but before I go to that, one last thing. I may be releasing some things over as ebooks soon. Just a few things that I've been working on over the past couple of years that are too small to release as like a major publication. So if when those come out, I'll make sure to show them and link them to everybody.
Release the Kraken.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, we have a question from Cringewalker, and he says, any update on the NHS letter?
Yeah, that's directed to me. Yeah, so basically there was this sort of racial consciousness nonsense from a diversity officer in the NHS, and I wrote a direct letter to the NHS, actually to the nursing union. I've not had any reply from that, but the letter has gone in. It's gone in sort of electronically and physically. If anything happens about it, I'll mention it on some sort of stream.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And just in terms of next time, I'm hoping to do a one-off stream on the future of right-wing art, where I think we're trying to get a panel of right-wing artists, and we'll obviously include Panama as a poet as well, just to chat about patrons, communities, groups. There's some really interesting questions being asked. So if you have any questions for that, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll try and pick them up. But
that is going to be a fascinating stream. A bunch of talking about modern being an artist with traditional inclinations in the modern day. A whole panel of them.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay, cool. I think let's leave it at that. So just want to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Panama.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, everyone.